Hello, everybody, and welcome back to FranklinCovey's On Leadership series. My name is Scott Miller, and I serve as your weekend host of what is the world's largest distributed and subscribed to weekly leadership podcast. We are delighted now to be approaching our 150th episode, and today we have two people who are literally going to rock your world. These are the authors of the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Humor Seriously, which is also, believe it or not, a legitimate 4-credit class at Stanford. And today we are joined by Jennifer Aaker and Naomi Bagdonas. Welcome to On Leadership, ladies.
Hello, thanks for having us, Scott.
Yes, so happy to be here.
Now, which one of you is the smart one and which one of you is the smarter one?
It's probably pretty obvious from looking at us.
Is it?
Just look.
Is both.
Look at the hair. Which one looks smarter?
I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Ladies, it is an honor to have you both on. This book has just debuted in the last few weeks. It has sort of swept the literary world by storm. Several #1 bestseller status in categories on Amazon, Wall Street Journal bestseller, probably one of the biggest books written in this space between, sort of serious business intentions and bringing levity and humor. In fact, the basis of the book really is kind of talking about this dichotomy that is the balance of levity and humor. We're delighted you both joined us. What I'd like to do before we get into the book, the nature of your course at Stanford, and these leadership competencies that you're going to reinforce today, I'd like to invite you both maybe to give us just a few minutes on each of your backgrounds. Jennifer, you're on the right side of my screen, so I'll talk to you first. Jennifer Aaker, talk a little bit about your background and reintroduce our audience, viewers, and listeners to your journey that has led you to co-author this book with Naomi.
Yes, so my journey is this. Never have been funny, never wanted to be funny. Funny for me was equated with clowns and rubber chickens and whoopee cushions. Not very efficient tool in your career. It's certainly not something that I got my PhDs at Stanford, and so you don't really learn that as you learn, behavioral science as I did. So that's how I spent the large majority of my life until, about 8 years ago, I had created a book called The Dragonfly Effect with my husband, Andy Smith. And the intent of the book was to help people harness the power of story and social networks to make positive change. And in that moment of time when launching the book, I met a guy named Amit Gupta, who's the CEO of Photo Jojo, a startup. And he was diagnosed with leukemia and was looking to harness the power of story and social networks to find a match for him so that he could have a bone marrow transplant. There was no match in the bone marrow registry for him. And so we worked with him, as well as 12 of my students. And what was so amazing, in this incredibly serious moment, which is not fun or funny, he leveraged humor. He had these BYOSA parties, bring your own South Asian, to bars in New York and lofts. He had comedians, Aziz Ansari and Chris Pratt, actually create little PSAs to give a spit about cancer. And in the course of a very short period of time, we got over 100,000 people in the bone marrow registry. A perfect match was found for him. And there was matches found for countless others because of this. And it was shocking to me that humor in his case was not a distraction. In fact, it actually fueled, it made people want to, work on this campaign together. It bonded people. And I went from being shocked he was using humor to surprised that we aren't all doing this, even in moments which are very great.
Jennifer, thank you for the intro. Naomi, walk us on your journey as well.
I came at it from probably the opposite side of Jennifer, which is humor was always really important to me to a degree that was like annoying to everyone around me. I was voted class clown of my high school, and it was a real value in my family. So my grandparents during the Depression used to put on skit nights in their basement for all of the neighborhood kids. My growing up, for every birthday, someone got a custom song written about them that was ridiculous and hilarious. And so, especially in the hard times growing up, there was this incredible value around humor, that the wasted day is that in which we have not laughed. So every day we're going to laugh. And then I went to work and everything changed. So I started working at a large consultancy And I thought that I had to act a certain way in order to be successful, especially as a young woman in business. And that was serious, pristine, austere, not at all anything having to do with humor. And so I started leading essentially a double life, where by day I was coaching executives and climbing the ranks in my organization very quickly. And then by night, I was doing improv comedy. I was going to comedy shows with my friends. I was performing at indie theaters. And this all sort of came to a head for me when one day a client made a totally offhand comment to me, which it was a Friday afternoon. And she said to me, Naomi, I bet I know exactly what you do on your Friday nights. And which is a weird comment from a client. I said, okay, Bonnie, what do I do? And she goes, I bet that you go home, you hang out by yourself, and you watch History Channel documentaries while re-ironing your blouses for the next week. Like no semblance of a personality or of any fun. Not that that is a bad life. It just wasn't mine. And so it was this realization for me of I was totally incongruent inside of work and outside. And at the same time, I had this realization that, oh my gosh, actually bringing my sense of humor to work not only could help make it more sustainable for me, help me feel more authentic, have fun for goodness sake with my colleagues, but also it might be a very real competitive advantage for me. And so that's where I started on this journey. And then of course, Jennifer and I crossed paths, and it's been a love story ever since.
Well, Bonnie may have missed the description of your life, but she sure described my life for the last year, which is basically watching the History Channel and ironing my shirts every night because I haven't left the house in a year. So welcome, ladies.
Do you have a cat? Do you have a cat?
Is the cat named
Do
Cat?
I look like a cat guy? I mean, come on. Do I look like a cat guy? How insulting, cats. Okay, Jennifer, let's talk a bit about the premise of the book. It really is an effort between the two of you to debunk this dichotomy between gravity and levity. I've worked at the FranklinCovey company for 25 years. This is an enormously reputable firm, the highest level of character and competence. I am honored to be associated with this brand. We are not a funny place. I would even really call it a great fun place. We're mission-driven. We love and respect each other. We are very focused on our client's outcome. But I would call it, it's a place where if you're fun or funny, then you're probably not serious or smart. And so I think it's a fair statement of a lot of companies. Walk us on this path of how the two of you came to debunk this dichotomy between gravity and levity.
Absolutely. So one of the things we find is that there's these myths associated with humor. First, I'm not funny. Well, we have actual data to suggest that you, and at Scott, we just abuse you of that notion that you don't have humor because you've already landed 4 jokes before this interview. And so even in places that take themselves very seriously and the work that they do with clients very seriously, humor can exist. Also, humor is not the same thing as being funny, which I'll get to in 1 second. But it's really important to know that you can take your work very seriously, but not take yourself too seriously. And that myth, this serious business myth, this idea that using humor or levity in the context of business would actually detract or impede your goals, your progress toward your goals, is in fact flawed. We have data to suggest that, leaders that that have a sense of humor, any sense of humor, just a sense of humor. And this is, again, different than being funny. It's just a sense of humor, are 27% more motivating and admired. That leaders that use a sense of humor at work are they often enjoy higher perceptions of respect and status, as well as are seen as more competent and confident. And importantly, this research has shown that happens even if there's a laugh line that is not good. So even if these leaders use humor that's not good, as long as it's not inappropriate, it actually serves you well. And teams that work under these leaders are twice as more creative in creative tasks. You also see huge health advantages at a moment in time where mental health has been on the decline. This is really important. So Scott, there's one study that shows it actually tracked Norwegian individuals, Norway, not a country really known for its sense of humor, and ask them a simple question, do you have a sense of humor? Any sense of humor. And those individuals who said yes ended up on average living 8 years longer and were 30% more resistant to severe disease. So the benefits from a physical angle are significant and a mental health perspective are significant, and it's free. And we're leaving it on the table. It's underappreciated and underleveraged.
You know, when I first read your book, a visceral memory came to mind. I've mentioned I've been in this firm for 25 years, had an amazing career. I am an unabashed evangelist of the FranklinCovey Company. For 6 years, I served as the general manager of our Chicago region, running a large business division. And the Atlanta division, the Southeast division, was run by two guys. They had to have two men to equal my intelligence in the central region. But what was great about the two guys that ran the Atlanta office, Mark and Chris, who are still very revered in the company, they were riotous. Whenever I would go down to their office for a team meeting or a general manager meeting, they were laughing and cracking jokes and just riotously laughing. And in the Chicago office, where I ran it, it was a morgue. I mean, I ran a morgue full of productive but live people. And I used to always leave kind of jealous, but I would come back and I would not lighten it up because it wasn't the culture of our firm. Naomi, what advice would you give to people like me that feel like they don't have permission, that maybe the culture is so buttoned down or stayed to implement the right level of humor? We're going to talk about the 4 types of humor in a moment, but how do you give yourself permission, Naomi, in a culture where maybe it's not as free to be yourself and to bring humor to the workplace?
Yeah, I think part of this, and you as a leader in this situation, right, you have a lot more leeway than perhaps people who are more junior to you. So I think for you as a leader, it's recognizing that there is real ROI on this for you, that your ability to, by the way, you're having fun on weekends. You're definitely having fun on weekends. And that's what the data shows, that people are laughing, they're smiling, they're having a good time on weekends, and then they come to work and they completely shut it down, right? So this is not you like pulling something from thin air and becoming someone you're not. It's just being a more coherent, cohesive version of yourself, authentic version of yourself. And so, all right, so how do you overcome this hurdle as a leader that you shouldn't have humor at work? And I think it's to first and foremost know what the benefits are. So number one, humor increases our power. It enhances other people's perceptions of our status and influence. Jennifer mentioned it makes us more motivating, and it influences other people's behavior and decision-making. People make different decisions if we have some lightheartedness. Number two, bonds. We know that humor quickens the path to trust and self-disclosure. So Dick Costolo, the former CEO of Twitter, used to say that he uses humor so that his people feel safe sharing things with him that are going to be important information for him as the CEO to know, right? He says, listen, my job isn't to prevent bad things from happening. It's to cover things up once they do. It's to fix things once they do happen. But if my people don't feel safe enough coming to me and sharing those bad things, then we're in big trouble. And so for him, humor was a leadership skill to build trust and to have his people feel comfortable coming to him even with bad news. Third, of course, creativity. So we know that humor primes our brains for connection. It makes individuals more likely to solve creativity challenges. It helps people feel psychologically safe enough to share wild and bold ideas that are going to end up being the ones that no one else at other organizations are coming up with. And then finally, resilience, which of course is more important now than ever, that we know when we have laughter, even just the anticipation of laughter. So if someone walks into that room, your office, and they know that they are not going to be laughing, versus if they walk into another office and they expect that there's going to be some laughter in the room, what happens is their cortisol goes down, their epinephrine goes down, and therefore they become more resilient, more creative, and they're able to bounce back more quickly to setbacks. By the way, Scott, I don't believe for a second that you ran a non-funny office. So you can tell us that, but not going to believe it.
Well, yeah, that was a humorous morgue for sure.
We almost had a visit from Jennifer's dog. I saw that tail wagging back there.
Did you see how I take the dog out?
I saw that, Jennifer. I'm calling you out.
Remove the dog out.
Naomi, I appreciate your consideration that I might have fun on the weekends. I did prior to getting married and having 3 children. And they just stole the fun away from me on my weekends. Now it's mowing lawns and doing laundry and cleaning up their spills. Jennifer, let's talk about the 4 styles of humor, including the 5th being, canine serendipitous entrance. The first one is stand-up. Talk about how you define the first style of humor, stand-up. What are the positives and perhaps negatives of that style?
Absolutely. So stand-ups, they're bold and outgoing. They're not afraid to, ruffle a few feathers to get a laugh. They often use humor as a form of intimacy. So if I tease you, it means I like you.
Yeah.
So think kind of Amy Schumer or maybe Eddie Murphy. And as a result, one of the downsides of this humor is, it's fun to be with them. They're often, the light of a party, but there is downside. So you can imagine some of the risks associated with using humor, especially right now during a moment in time where there is a lot of sensitive topics that need discussing. You're more likely to actually say something that's, potentially inadvertently inappropriate, offensive, or alienating. And then the second one is a sweetheart. The sweethearts would never do that. They would never offend or, take a risk, that might actually hurt someone and their feelings. But they're earnest, they're honest, they uplift, they might be not necessarily known as being funny, but their sense of humor comes to life in kind of more nuanced ways. So I'll go down downsides in a second. Let me go the other two. Then there's a sniper. They're edgy, they're dry, they're nuanced. They're the deliverer of that, that zinger that you often hear in a meeting. And so their humor doesn't necessarily uplift or take others down per se, but it often is used to make a point. Like they see something and they're going to go in with that one-liner. And then there's the magnet, and they tend to be affiliative and kind of boisterous, sometimes even silly. And they're very charismatic. They're more likely to create very inclusive environments, which is one of their significant benefits. I will stop for a second and show you or invite Naomi, who is definitely a magnet in her core, although she shifts across styles, to just do a little magnet kind of stuff. Naomi, can you share?
All right. So magnets are going to be a little more fun, a little goofier. They're going to magnets have a lot of shoulder movement going on. Whereas from stand-ups, you're going to get a lot of finger pointing. Snipers, you're going to get a lot of sitting back and a zinger. And then sweethearts are going to be smiling and really generous with their humor. They might not be the funniest ones in the room, but they're going to bring a lot of levity.
All right, so didn't you just enjoy that little?
Well, I did. I can see Naomi as a break dancer back in the 80s or something, Naomi.
Look at those shoulders.
That was so very natural to you, that shoulder movement.
Wow, I so appreciate that. And I'm going to tell you, no one wants me to see me on a dance floor, okay? Because what you just saw, those are my best moves, sitting or standing.
Naomi, so many great stories in the book. The book is funny. The book has gravitas. Of course it does. It has a 4x4 matrix. You have to have a 4x4 matrix to have an intellectual book. You talk about finding your Apple moments, and you share a kind of a touching story. Would you take a few moments and recreate this idea about finding your Apple moments?
Sure. So this was actually early in our research journey. We had just spent 2 days at the Second City Theater in Chicago doing this immersive comedy experience with 10 behavioral scientists across the country. And it was after that experience, so we were really primed for humor at the moment. We go to the airport, O'Hare Airport, Jennifer and I part ways, and I go do something that is completely unremarkable, which is to buy an apple at an airport bodega. So I go to the front of the line because I see that there's this waxy pyramid display of apples, and I'm actually not sure if they are for sale. So I go to the front of the line just to say, hey, are those apples for sale? She looks at me and she goes, yeah, they're for sale if you get in line. Really harsh. Okay, so I go, all right, no problem, I'll get in line. Go back in line, and I just watched this woman who was behind the counter, and she was really curt. She was yelling, snapping at the people who were coming up in line. She clearly had a really bad day, right? I don't know what's going on in her life, but she was really sour. And so I got to the front of the line, and instead of saying, can I have an apple? I simply said, can I please have your favorite apple? And she paused and she looked at me like I was crazy and said, what do you mean my favorite apple? And I said, well, there's this huge pyramid display. So just whichever one is your favorite, I would love to buy that one. And in that moment, everything shifted. It was bizarre. She had the smallest smile. Then it turned into her looking for the apples, and then she was digging through, and then a couple people behind her in line were like, oh, like, what about that apple? What about that apple? So now we're all laughing together. We're all digging through the apples. And finally she picks up two and she goes, okay, these are the two best ones. I've done my research. Like, these are the ones. Which one do you want? And I said, I don't know. It's not my favorite apple. It's yours. So she looks at them, she picks one and she hands it to me and she's smiling. And I went to pay and she said, that's okay. You know, I don't charge for my favorite apple. And as I'm walking away, I just look back at her and she's smiling at the next person in line. And there's this fundamentally different energy. And so what we tell our students and what we write about in the book is that's what we hope to create in the world. We're not trying to create stand-up comedians. We're not trying to have you tell the perfect one-liner. We're trying to create these apple moments where we fundamentally shift the way that we interact with the world and the way that it interacts back. So that's those apple moments is really what we're going for.
Naomi, thank you.
Also nutrition.
Yeah, exactly. Jennifer, there's this fine balance, is there not, between what I might find lighthearted and humorous or even riotous and what someone else may find diminishing or offensive or complaint-worthy. I'm sure this is not a new question to you. What advice do you give to leaders, colleagues, business professionals to kind of find their groove, know their audience, to deploy the valuable aspect of humor in the workplace and recognize that it's an intense time, it's a litigious time. People are generally pretty sensitive these days. What advice do you give us to find our groove?
Right. So one of the basic sort of rules of thumb or principles that guide our class is no malice. And so the intent when you use humor, at least in these more trusting environments like our class, is, you know, the intent is no malice. And then it kind of starts from there. So never punch down, right? So don't take on someone lower levels of status. You can punch up, but not punch down. Understand how your humor style lands. So for example, the risks associated with being, for example, a stand-up or a sniper are significant right now, especially if you're in a large room. You don't understand how to read the room in certain contexts. And so shifting a style toward potentially more magnet or even sweetheart are actual strategies that are both authentic to people, but also really smart to do, because that type of style, like for example, the magnet style, often uplifts others and creates this feeling of inclusion. And then there's also, you know, like from a more tactical perspective, if there is something that, you know, was an overstep or an oversight or a joke that didn't land or a humor line that wasn't well received, you know, a couple of different options. One, you know, if it was just something that was like slightly over the edge and you kind of get the sense that it did not land, you know, more often than not, it often actually helps to call it out. So, you know, you could sort of, you know, speak to the truth of that moment and say like, hey, I'll be here all night, or, you know, hey, that one didn't land, let me try another one, that kind of thing, and just diffusing the situation. And then in other contexts, you know, when more sort of egregious missteps were made, we also have an entire day, an entire chapter in the book, chapter 7, that gives people frameworks and tools to be able to better, A, not make that happen, and B, if it does happen, how do you actually recover?
Naomi, on that point, when humor fails and you say something and it's outright, it just lands flat, or perhaps you said what you were thinking and you shouldn't have, and you thought it was funnier than it was, welcome to my entire career. What advice do you give someone that, you know, did not intend, their intent was not to diminish or offend, but clearly your delivery of it, your style, your timing did not land well? Naomi, what's a good recovery technique for someone in the moment to maybe take responsibility for it, make light of it, and maybe deflect or move on?
Yeah, so I want to say two things. First, I'm going to give a tactic. And second, I want to talk about the importance of calibration, because you're hitting on a really important point, especially for leaders, Scott, that we lose our calibration. So first, what to do in the moment. As Jennifer mentioned, there are two kinds of humor fails. One, totally benign. You use some humor, it doesn't land just because it's appropriate, but maybe the joke was just too lame. In that situation, double down, right? Oh, well, that one didn't land, or not my audience today, or like, I promise I will never do that again, right? So just acknowledging in the moment will often get a laugh, and that's all you need. Now, if you do cross a line, if something doesn't go well and you know that maybe you've stepped on some toes, acknowledge it right away in the moment, and more importantly, lean in and figure out what you did wrong. So I'll give one example in the book that we give is Thomas, who was the CEO of a large media company. He had to let someone on his executive team go. In the first meeting of that executive team that she used to run, he walked into the room, he recognized that he was feeling uncomfortable and he wanted to diffuse that tension. And so we'll call her Sarah. He said, "Sarah, over to you," because she normally runs that meeting. Now, Sarah was not in the room because he had just fired her. This was not a good joke, right? The entire room went silent. Everyone was really uncomfortable. And in fact, someone even stood up and said, "I don't think that was very funny." So Thomas in that moment did a 180, which is exactly what you should do. He acknowledged it. He said, "I'm so sorry." He genuinely said what was going on for him, which was, "I made that joke out of a genuine insecurity because I had to let her go and I haven't come to terms with that." And then he said, "Can I please start over?" Right? And they said, "Absolutely, you can start over." He started over the meeting and he said, "Hi, everyone. First, I want to recognize that Sarah's not here today. Let's take a minute and talk about what impact that's going to have on our team and on our workloads," right? And he went forward. And so it sounds cheesy, but humor can be such a live wire for people because it has so much context wrapped into it. And so when you do fail, when you do cross a line, it's so important to acknowledge it and genuinely apologize. The second thing I wanted to mention, Scott, is around calibration. Now, this is critical because as people rise in status in an organization, a couple things happen. One, they lose their calibration for what's funny because people laugh at high status people because of their status, not necessarily because they're funny. So if you tell the same absolute lame joke, like lame dad joke, to two groups of people, tell one group of people or make one group of people believe that you are their peer or even someone of lower status than them, you'll get crickets. Tell that same group of people that you are a high status individual, make them believe that you're high status, and you're going to get roaring laughter. And so for leaders, these opportunities when you fail are so critical for us to recognize what are our pitfalls, what's going on that we need to actually improve. And then, of course, the other thing, as Jennifer mentioned, is when you rise in status, your playing field narrows because you can no longer punch up. Everyone who you look around you, if you're making fun of them, you're punching down. So you have to fundamentally look for different things to joke about.
Naomi, superb advice. Our time is coming to an end. Jennifer, I'd like to ask you a kind of a last question around sarcasm. My wife Stephanie and I both come from families where our fathers' communication style, their humor style is both sarcasm. Great fathers, great men, people that are both still alive and we love and respect them. And like I said, their default communication style is sarcasm. And it's not healthy. And it has a diminishing impact. And I'll tell you, it has taken its place in my own style. And I don't like it. What, Jennifer, from your research and background, would you say about sarcasm? And for people who are self-aware enough, or perhaps now maybe have an epiphany about their style is sarcasm, when should that be deployed? When should it not be deployed? How do we generally manage that sarcastic go-to style?
Yeah, so a couple of things to consider. First, if you don't know what style you have, just go to humorseriously.com and take the quiz. And data will tell you.
Genius plug. Look at that, man. They are both marketers, they're authors, they're PhDs,
Did you see that?
They're humorists.
Did you see?
Look at that.
$21.99 is the book, Humor Seriously. It's at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and wherever books are sold. But what were you saying, Scott? It was a question.
I think I was plugging your
sarcasm.
website. So yeah.
Sarcasm. Okay, sounds good. We got that out of the way. It is true though. Sarcasm does, co-linger with sniper style. So it does help to kind of like identify your style. And also buy the book. And then what you want to do is be able to understand when is that sarcastic style actually useful or not. So to your question, I bet if your wife's dad and your dad get together, they have a great time. Like they can use sarcasm to the night, till it becomes night. And so just, having trusted friends and or other people who really love that style and where it actually does create this affiliative bond, right? And so that's one place to actually keep, for sure, keep using it. And then the second thing I would say is just better understanding what your secondary dimension is for even highly sarcastic people. You know, they might have a secondary dimension of being a stand-up like you, Scott, or, you know, you, Scott, or, you know, magnet, et cetera. And so being able to lean in and shift your style in different contexts with new people or people you don't know very well is another great strategy.
Ladies, you have proven that you can be smart and fun, that levity and gravity can coexist. I thank you both for your time. The book is Humor Seriously: Why Humor is a Secret Weapon in Business and Life, and How Anyone Can Harness It, Even You. I secondly apologize to all the cat lovers out there. Naomi led me down that sordid path. And Jennifer, thank you.
Wow.
Jennifer, thank you for your dog's partial appearance. Naomi, great conversation. Thank you both. Ladies, great success to you and to your ongoing course at Stanford University. You don't need my recommendation on the book, but I'll tell you, everybody, it's a great balance of, as a leader and a professional, how do you bring your humor style out for the benefit of building a great culture where people bring their whole selves to work. Ladies, thank you again for your time. I know you have back-to-back interviews for your book launch. Congrats on your success, and perhaps we'll see you back here for your next book as well. Naomi, thank you. Jennifer, thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Bye, Scott.
And thanks for joining us, everybody. Great book. I encourage you to pick it up. Humor Seriously by Jennifer and Naomi, and we'll see you back here for another interview next week on leadership.